I still remember the course I took with you, and I'm going to mention that you were dressed in a Hawaiian shirt when I first saw you.
You guys are live.
I think we're live. You're welcome to say what you like.
You guys are live. You can take the stage now. All the best.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks.
Rebecca.
All right. So, good morning, everyone, and happy Teachers' Day to all of you. My name is Rakesh Godwani. I'm the founder of School of Meaningful Experiences. And this weekend is a very special weekend for us. First, it happens to be my elder brother's birthday as well, and he's a great teacher to me. So, happy birthday, Dr. Sumit Godwani. Second, it is a Teacher's Day, and I encourage everybody of you to wish them, and not only today, I think you should wish them every day. And there is one more lovely day of Guru Purnima that we celebrate with amazing respect, so we should carry that. And the last is that School of Meaningful Experiences has organized an online debating competition called Debato 2020 today and tomorrow. We have about 100 plus teams from about 30 cities around the world, and we have more than 110 judges from around the world. So it's going to be a very nice event that we are going to start. And to kickstart our event, we have invited Professor Rajiv Gowda. He happened to be my faculty when I was doing my PGSM program. This is the 3-year part-time program that IMB offered for working professionals like me. And this was, I think, class L11 or L12, one of those classrooms where Three Idiots was shot. And this was one course that was offered to PGP, PGSM together. So we were encouraged to share courses, and I took this course. So I walk into this class and I see a gentleman wearing a Hawaiian shirt. And I said, okay, I think I'm in the right place. This is the kind of classrooms we should have. And I had a great time in that course. It was about business, governance, politics, and various exciting things because I love communication. So we talked about how articles in newspapers impact policy making and how policies change our lives. And over time, Rajiv and I became great friends. He has been a keen supporter of School of Meaningful Experiences. The reason I really admire him is that there was one track where you could continue to be a tenured faculty and enjoy life, and it's a lovely life to be a tenured faculty. But Rajiv is very different. Rajiv said that if I have to really do something, I have to go to where the main work is. So he became a Rajya Sabha member and he spent 6 years there. And I have a very high regard for him that he decided to leave a tenured professorship to go and debate and serve the country in his own way. So I thought there is no better person to help us understand parliamentary debates. And without much ado, I would now let Professor Rajiv Gowda talk to us about what really happens in a parliamentary debate. What are those one or two key things that you should be prepared with? And all of you out there, we encourage you to express yourselves and speak up because communication is very important for democracy. Your views are very important for citizenship. But I think in this masterclass, I'd like Rajiv to talk about his experiences of debating in the well of the parliament. So, Rajiv, please tell us those one or two things from your experiences about parliamentary debates and what we should watch out for.
Thank you. Thank you, Rakesh. And happy Teachers' Day to everybody. It also happens to be my younger brother's birthday, Rakesh. So, and so I'll say happy birthday, Dr. Siddhartha. Anyway, so there we go. Looks like we both have doctor siblings. Anyway, just to sort of clarify about my, dress choices. I'm usually quite a conservative, sober dresser. But that day when you actually saw me, you forgot to mention that I think I must have been wearing dark glasses. I think I
Yes,
had, yeah. So I had conjunctivitis or something, and I had been asked to wear dark glasses. So I said, if I'm going into a classroom with dark glasses on, I might as well go in looking like a film star. So there's a very colorful shirt to go along with the dark glasses.
I missed
Anyway,
that.
Yeah. But that's the reason why that combination actually took place. Anyway, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for all the work that you and your colleagues are doing to build up the School of Meaningful Experiences, to provide a platform and to, really empower our youngsters in so many dimensions that are often not encouraged enough or emphasized enough in the class and school, rat race, as it were. Now, coming to the question that you asked, and since one of the things that I've learned in Parliament is to stick to time and to get my point across quickly, I will get to the points that you brought up. One small correction: the well of the house is where we're discouraged from entering. That's where we enter when we want to disrupt the house and not to actually allow debate to continue. So that's just a little, and for all my being a professor in America and India, I have also been an occasional, sort of disruptor, because as the late Mr. Arun Jaitley once said, disruption is also a legitimate parliamentary tactic. So that's if the government refuses to listen and and accommodate your views or provide an opportunity to express concern over some issue or the other, then members sometimes will rush into the well and say, we are not going to allow the House to function unless you pay attention to us. So it's a good point to bring up actually, because this does tell you about the setting. The setting involves a government, which typically has a majority, and an opposition, which does not have a majority but still would like to have its voice heard. And that's where the parliamentary tradition has a long history of accommodation, of respect for other people's points of view. And so disruption usually takes place when the opposition's point of view is not taken into account, or questions that we want to ask are not allowed, where issues that we want to raise are not being added to the agenda. That's the sort of thing that happens. But let's take a step back and think about the evolution of parliamentary debate. This isn't something original to Indian democracy today. Democratic discussion and debate has been going on in India. It has a historic tradition within India. You had Vaishali and historic city-states which were democracies in India. Of course, the ones out of Greece are the most famous, Athens and Sparta and things like that. And of course, the more modern tradition comes from Britain, and where Parliament managed to evolve ever since the Magna Carta into a body which was as powerful as the king, and therefore had a very significant impact on the evolution of legislation, served to provide what are called checks and balances on absolute power, authority that the king used to exercise. And of course, you had revolutions in France. You had the French Revolution leading to a parliament, and so the word itself comes from a French word which is parler, which means to talk. So parliament and talking and debating is very essential to everything. I should also mention the old Roman Senate, but the one memory we may now have of the Roman Senate is of a bunch of senators assassinating Julius Caesar. So probably not the greatest example to discuss at this point. Anyway, the issue here is that in these settings, what really matters is that every side is listening to the other side, and and even if the ultimate vote will go in favor of one side, it's important to place your views on the record, to raise your point of view in such a manner that you might actually persuade the government to change something or the other. And that happens every once in a while. And let me go straight to an example of of a change that I was involved with fairly recently. Okay, see, we have two houses of parliament, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. The BJP, the ruling party, has an extraordinary majority in the Lok Sabha, and together with alliance partners in the NDA, it is able to pass legislation with a majority in the Rajya Sabha. So Usually, if they've already passed a bill in a particular form in one house, they are disinclined to bring about change in the other house, right? So many times we say, look, there are flaws in this bill. These issues haven't been considered. Let us send it to a committee for further refinement. So sometimes that sort of a process actually takes place. But when we considered a bill called the Surrogacy Regulation Bill, this had to do with the practice of what is called surrogate pregnancy, where where an embryo is implanted in a volunteer surrogate's womb who brings the baby to birth. Okay, so and this has unfortunately become a bit of a racket, and we were trying to regulate it through this bill. So the bill had been passed in the Lok Sabha. It came to the Rajya Sabha. I was the first speaker from, usually the opposition initiates the debate on any bill, and as the largest opposition party, the Congress, asked me to initiate the debate on the surrogacy regulation bill. See, I have another advantage. I am the head of the Congress Party's research department. So I have a bunch of bright youngsters who work with me and who help me get into the details in a manner that maybe some of my colleagues don't have that same team capacity. Okay, but part of my job is to also help all my colleagues with the research that we conduct. Anyway, so as we went through this particular bill, we've discovered a number of flaws. And in my speech, I laid out all these flaws and made very constructive suggestions on how to change things. Interestingly, the other speakers, including BJP speakers, picked up on these criticisms and echoed them. At the end of this debate, the Minister of State for Parliamentary Affairs came to me and said, you know what, we are going to create a committee of this House. It's called a Select Committee of the Rajya Sabha. We're going to send this bill to that committee, and please give us your inputs. We will refine this bill and bring it back. And once that's done, it will go back to the other house because bills have to be passed in identical form in both houses. So this is an example of how reasoned debate is able to actually make an impact on the evolution of laws. And ultimately, Parliament is also a legislative, a lawmaking body. And this was an example of something where I was able to actually claim, I actually listed in my profile that I managed to get the government to change its mind. It's not an easy thing. I want to also mention one other example that people might be able to relate to, which doesn't have this kind of a happy outcome. There was a bill called the e-cigarettes regulation bill or something like that. Okay, and the e-cigarettes bill, the aim was to impose a ban on these devices, which are essentially nicotine delivery devices, and which are alternatives to tobacco smoking or tobacco chewing and things like that. Okay, you might have heard of Juul, and there are some devices out there. Juul was preparing to enter the market, and so the government came out with this bill which said, we want to stop this market from even emerging, and therefore they came up with this bill very quickly saying we're going to ban e-cigarettes and these kinds of devices. So I was again the person from the opposition who initiated the debate, and I drew upon, I don't know if you know, but one of my other specializations is how people and societies manage risk. Okay, so one of my last edited books is called Judgments, Decisions, and Public Policy, which is about risk management of health and environmental risks. We are living through, a huge case study, the COVID crisis. It's a risk management issue, right? So there I pointed out that, look, when we want to make decisions about products, you have to make a decision about trade-offs. If you ban e-cigarettes, the old technology, which is regular cigarettes, will continue, and that kills so many, such a large number of people every year, and causes all kinds of diseases. This technology doesn't seem to have the same side effects, and therefore those people who want to leave cigarettes and switch to something else, but are still addicted to nicotine, that this may be a solution that's worth retaining. And the minister said, I raided some school students' bags and we found e-cigarettes devices in there. And so I actually countered and I said, Mr. Minister, if you didn't find e-cigarettes in there, you'd find cigarettes. You know, teenagers sometimes tend to experiment with things that are forbidden, and bans don't work so well. Why don't you regulate this through the pharmacy system, things like that? But the minister was adamant, and we did not see any change. But I did make a very persuasive argument, and that argument is sitting there in the records of Parliament with the aim of someday if something changes, we might see, that this is the track record. And many times, if a case is being brought in a court, a high court or a Supreme Court, sometimes the judges will say, what is the legislative history behind this law? And in that legislative history, while the government's views carry the day, the opposition and other points of view will also be, the judges will pay attention. So it's a very, important part of the whole exercise to be able to, have a point and counterpoint, thrust and counter thrust, and some of the veteran speakers who are amazingly good at argument. It's a joy to listen to them. They are, for example, the late Mr. Arun Jaitley, was a master of spin. When his government or his position was being attacked, he would find a way to, to twist facts, to change the dimensions of the discussion in a manner that would suit his agenda rather than what I would consider, the actual reality. So those sorts of things are very, very important. I'll just make one or two quick points and close on this issue. The style of delivery is very different. I would urge the listeners to tune into Rajya Sabha TV or Lok Sabha TV from the 14th of this month. We're going to have the monsoon session of Parliament live. But otherwise, we have both houses have their YouTube channels, and you might, maybe later we can discuss some good speeches that are worth tuning into. Okay, most recently, Moha Maitra, the Trinamool firebrand MP, she had a very powerful speech about a year ago when she just entered Parliament. And, so there are such people like Owaisi from the MIN is a very powerful speaker. Across the board, there are some extremely, of course, the Prime Minister, is unparalleled as a communicator. So basically, there's so many different speeches one can listen to, and and learn on how things are done. But essentially, what happens is that every person who is speaking in the House is addressing the chair. So that so you're not really talking to your colleagues across the aisle. You're talking to the chair, and through the chair addressing the House. That's one feature. The other is that there's a lot of rhetoric. There's a particular style of communication that really is more convincing and impactful in a political setting. See, the two speeches that I talked about, which I gave, they emphasize logic a lot more. Okay, persuasion through facts and reasoning. All right, but there's much more that can be achieved if you are able to embrace rhetoric, if you are able to convey your point in a manner that captures the imagination, it touches people's hearts. And so I'll just give you one example. There was a backbencher, a Sikh backbencher MP from the BSP, not someone who was a renowned speaker or anything like that. And on one occasion, our former Chief Minister, Sir Raman Gowda, was the railway minister at the time. And he had introduced the railway budget, which talked about changing upgrading railway stations and making them very fancy and introducing coffee days and cafes and things like that. Okay? And so this backbencher MP, when it was his turn to speak, stood up and said, Mr. Railway Minister, your party came to power campaigning on one story that your prime ministerial candidate in his youth sold tea on railway station platforms. Once you transform these railway stations and make them so fancy, what scope is there for a tea seller to even enter this railway station platform? Okay, so by asking that question and all of us turning our heads and saying, "Ooh, what is this?" He basically conveyed very, very impactfully the importance of open access, of equity, of making sure that public settings remain available and accessible to everyone. All right. So that's an example of communication of this sort. Okay. Excuse me for 1 second. I'll just be right back. Okay.
Sure. I think it has been a very enlightening. It's like sitting in Rajiv's classes all over again, and you not only enjoy the lectures, you also learn so much. I think that's one of the things I cherish from his classes, which are continuing today. So I'm going to lap up again.
Oh,
Please
okay.
continue,
Yeah, yeah.
Rajiv.
Yeah. So that's really the story of parliamentary debates. There's just so much that and then there's the other part, which is there is some other interesting artifacts, you might say. Okay. Um, you might have heard of Parkinson's law. Mr. Parkinson has some very interesting insights about how the nature of debates and the nature of political parties and things like that. And he argues that the design of a parliament house makes a huge difference to the kind of debate and discussion that take place. So if you look at Britain, it's basically two sides ranging against one another, right? And so you come in and you know whose side you're on and who to shout down on and who to oppose. While he says the French system, the Indian system, etc., has this sort of semicircular or horseshoe approach, and so people are all nuanced in their arguments on one side or the other, and of course there are people who are in between. But this lends itself to some interesting speeches. So you would suddenly hear a communist MP standing up and saying, to the government, you guys are terrible, and we'll be clapping when he says that. And then suddenly he turns around and says, and you guys were terrible when you were in office too. And said, oh, well. So all that also happens in a parliamentary setting. But one of the most important points is that in Parliament, the tradition that we've developed over the years is of we have a whole hour this devoted to something called question hour, right? And this is the time when MPs can raise questions and the government is duty bound to respond. And there are some prepared answers that come in, but there are, what shall we say, supplementary questions that are spontaneous, and the minister has to be absolutely prepared. Otherwise, we tend to laugh them off and mock them for being incompetent. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because Britain has a tradition of something called Prime Minister's Questions, where I think twice a week the Prime Minister stands up and the opposition leader and others question the Prime Minister, and this becomes a very, very significant back and forth, a debate, and people are very good at at repartee, at the cutting rejoinder, and things like that. And we have less of that tradition in Indian legislatures and parliament, but that's not because we didn't have the tradition to begin with. Our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, had an extraordinary majority in parliament, but he set in place the democratic practices where he would come and sit through every session of parliament, listen to all opposition voices. He would communicate, of course, and respond to them. And so in that manner, developed a tradition, a healthy tradition of parliamentary debate where it doesn't matter if you're even a sole independent MP, you will have the opportunity to go out there and make your point heard, and it will be in our temple of democracy, and it will be on record forever. So that's the kind of tradition that we've built up.
Fascinating. I think you have covered a huge breadth for all of our learners to start looking at that. A very significant part of the philosophy of debate is to bring a change which is healthy for everyone. Everybody's views are very important. Logic is the foundation, but how you deliver that logic, the style also becomes very critical. And I hope today and tomorrow our learners and debaters start to do that. And yes, at some point of time, things become favorable, things can be extremely brutal, and you have to go through all of these things because at some point of time, the tables turn. Today you are in opposition, tomorrow you'll be in power, and then again you'll be in opposition. So you have to understand that it is the spirit of philosophy and the democracy and the citizenship, which is where debating becomes the heart of. Here's a question that all my learners, and this is what School of Meaningful Experiences and I've been focusing on. Are speakers born or can this art be learned? And second question, there is this fear of speaking, claustrophobia. What will people think of me? And tell us your ways of dealing with it. How do you experience your colleagues and others talking about it? And give us some suggestions of how to deal with the fear of public speaking and practicing.
Rakesh, I should tell you a story about my own growth as a speaker, right? When I was in seventh standard or something like that, there was an interclass debating competition in St. Joseph White High School, and I had decided to take part, and I had prepared a speech. But when I say I had prepared a speech, I had mugged it up, right? So I had literally, by hearted it, or I had committed it to memory. Okay, and so I went there and I delivered my speech. There was a 3 minute warning bell, and when that bell rang, I forgot what was going to come next. Okay, so yeah, laughing. I came down crying. Actually, I felt terrible about my experience, and for a long time after that, I did not want to take part in debates. And actually, through school and college, after that, I became a veteran quizzer. A national runner-up on Mastermind BBC and things like that. But I let other people, dominate the world of debating. Not that I am incapable, but it's just that I was so traumatized, you might say, by that whole experience. So it took me years after that to summon the, I wouldn't say courage really, but, to basically realize that, given all my ambitions, the fact that I wanted to contest elections and have a career in public service in politics, that there's no way out of being, other than by being a good public speaker. So, one learned to take part in more activities and events. Some of it came from taking part in skits and dramas and things like that, where you do lose your fear of being on stage, right? Because you're with a bunch of people and you practice and somehow things work out all right. And then, over time, as you start in friendly settings, things improve. But actually, there are two, three things that are crucial. One, you shouldn't memorize things by rote. You should have a story to tell. Okay? And when it comes to having a story to tell, I would say that every Indian or every human being is a born storyteller. Okay? Because did I lose something? Am I still there?
Yeah, yeah, you're still there. We lost you for 10 seconds. So if you
Okay, because
can restate the last.
I got a phone call, so I should have put it on do not disturb. Anyway, we keep learning. Anyway, so the basic thing is that um, okay, there we go. You rang the bell, and I've forgotten the rest of my speech. No, just kidding. I'm pointing out that you need to have a story, and every human being is, it's part of human experience to be storytellers. We grow up listening to stories, and so, and in fact, this is my mantra for anyone who wants to know what to include in a speech or in a class presentation or anything, or even in an article. Think of it as telling a story to somebody else, right? There will be a beginning, which might be attention grabbing. Then you will develop the story a little bit, add some, detail, and then you bring it to a conclusion and a climax, right? And if you think about that formulation, and you think about, am I convincing somebody through this story? Very quickly you'll know this fits, this doesn't. This needs more emphasis, this doesn't. And so things actually fall into place when you think about storytelling, the narrative approach, as a way of conveying whatever you want to convey. So once you understand that, basically you figure out, if you want to take part in public speaking, in debates and things like that, you will discover that you know the story, you're just trying to convey the story, and therefore it shouldn't be so intimidating or difficult. It's just the practice that's required in terms of being able to rise to the occasion, and that comes from taking up more and more opportunities and getting over stage fright and things like that. See, each one of us continuously still experiences that in one way or the other. Sometimes we are thrust into extempore situations where somebody says, and this is an occupational hazard for us politicians, everywhere they go, will you say a few words? Hey boss, I just want to listen, yeah. And instead, there you go, you have to come up with something meaningful and profound and, life-changing, on topics that you may not necessarily know enough about. But that's the thing. So I still actually experience this. It is, sort of nervous tension in particular settings. I'll tell you which ones. Ones where I am with, a brand new audience in a different part of the world or something like that, where I'm concerned about, okay, what are the rules of the game here? If I am with many seniors from my own party or other opposition parties, and I have to impress them, right? So there's a certain amount of tension associated with that. And then other settings would be when, what shall we say, when I speak in Kannada or Hindi. See, we're not as, my mastery over English is incomparable compared to my my abilities in Kannada or Hindi. These are languages that I do know, and Hindi, of course, because I never get the gender of objects right, I'm constantly making mistakes. But I happily will go out there and give a speech in Hindi without thinking twice. Okay, it keeps the audience informed and entertained, I suppose. But the basic point is that in those settings, I am a little nervous because, many times I'm translating in real time, right? My thought has emerged in English, and I'm very quickly trying to convey that in another language. So it's a different level of tension. And of course, the biggest amount of tension comes from taking part in television debates, right? So, what is crucial to eliminating tension is preparation, knowing your arguments, preparing for counter arguments and things like that. But many times when I'm also a national spokesperson for my party, and I have in my time done probably 100 shows with Arnab Goswami. Okay, it's been a while now, but the basic thing is that I would go into some of those shows knowing that I'm going to be the guy picked for attack, okay? And that the issues that are being debated, there will be some new developments that I may not be aware of, because these are all often breaking stories that are debated, and many of these television anchors turn it into, in the old days we used to have something called ragging, where the seniors would pick on the juniors and really attack them verbally, with the aim of trying to corner them, humiliate them, and things like that. And many of these TV debates have become those kinds of toxic environments where there's no search for light. There's more heat that is generated, and the idea is that this is the target, and we're going to lynch that target on live television, okay, for the entertainment. It's like a Roman Colosseum, right, where the gladiators will fight each other, and the people will cheer, and then the king gets to decide whether whether the emperor gets to decide whether a person lives or dies, right? So that's the sort of that's what TV debates have become. They're toxic, and recently we had a spokesperson of my party who shares my name, in fact, who had a heart attack and died after a particularly toxic debate. He was in his early 50s. Okay, this is not worth it if you go through that. And I don't know what people get from watching these shows. I've sort of really come down, I've minimized my participation in these because it's just too much of, there were health effects, frankly, stress and diabetes and things like that, induced by this kind of a setting and the way it works. So we don't want those kinds of settings, and but in most circumstances, you don't have these kinds of adversarial, conflicting settings. You probably find those in courts and all that, but those are also well organized. One set of arguments and another set of arguments before the judge, addressing the judge rather than one another, and but with less manipulation by very, biased and partisan anchors, right? And so there is, this tremendous scope for for more learning and participation. But the way to become proficient at this is to take every opportunity. Some schools have what are called model United Nations. Some others have debates. Some have parliamentary debates and things like that. And to also tune in and listen to others, listen to people's TED Talks. And so you'll get a sense of, what makes a good speech, what particular styles of argument appeal to you. And I'll tell you one style that has remained in my memory for a long time. These are, tricks to convey a point, right? And this is a long, long time ago. There was a gentleman called Fidel Castro, okay, who was the head of Cuba. And Cuba was, probably still is, in some kind of a hostile political relationship with the United States. And Ronald Reagan was president at the time. And Fidel Castro showed up on TV. Someone was interviewing him. And he said, he kept saying, this was his style of attacking Reagan without seeming to attack him. And so Castro said, other people may call Reagan an idiot. I do not. Other people may call Reagan a warmonger. I do not. Other people may call him an imbecile. I do not. I have the greatest respect for him. And in the process, he went ahead and called him out 25 names and then said, no, I do not. Yeah, so there are all these little tricks of the trade that you pick up occasionally. So I thought I should share them while I'm here with all the youngsters.
Yeah, I think the youngsters have to be aware of everything.
I can't hear you, Rakesh.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Rajiv? I'm speaking. Can you hear me? Avantika, am I audible? Avantika, you there? Okay, just hold on. Let me see. Can everybody hear me at the live show? Just give me a comment.
Shall I rejoin? Shall I get out and come back in?
No, I think you are okay. Maybe a problem at my side. All my audiences, am I audible? And is Rajiv audible right now? Okay, so I'm audible. And Rajiv, maybe there's a problem with you. So can you rejoin again? Rajiv, can you rejoin?
I can't hear you. If you WhatsApp me, I can see that on my screen or something like that.
I'll do that. I'll WhatsApp you. Audiences listening to this, sorry about that. We will resume due to a tech issue. Rajiv is going to rejoin.
Okay, got it.
So he's going to come back. And while he's coming back, and if you can listen to me, I think A very big part you all have to know is the world is what it is. Whether there's a TV debate, whether there is a MUN, there is a class debate, and if you're doing postgraduate programs, there's a group discussion. Whether you're in a corporate world, there is a debate inside the corporate room. Debates are debates, they exist. Now, you can't say, I don't like them and I don't want to be a part of them. Rajiv, can you listen?
I can hear you now. Yes, thank you.
Okay, audible. Good. So I think we're set. I was just saying that our students of the 21st century have to adapt to this new world. We may not like the TV debates, but they exist and
Mhm.
they happen. And it may be possible that you end up there. So you have to follow the philosophy of debate, which is go with your argument, do what you can, and at some point of time, be prepared that this is a show. And at some point of time, a TV is a show that is catering to a very different need of an audience. But the same debate can help you in your corporate workplaces, in your universities, in your schools, and in group discussions and many more aspects. One last question, and yes, Rajiv,
Yeah,
go ahead.
one point. See, one other point I want to mention is that since I've been a professor for 20 odd years before I got elected to Parliament, that gave me a tremendous amount of practice in terms of being able to, tell a story, keep people's attention, and convey. So one of the things that people can also do is, in their own lives, teach their classmates, teach their peers, things like that. That gives them practice in communicating, and so that you don't have to do it on stage. You can just get that practice in every setting possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, Brilliant concept. I think communication is a skill that can be learned. I am of a firm belief, and I'm sure Rajiv would agree with me. We are not born speakers. All of us have the same capability of learning, just like how we can learn swimming and bungee jumping and math and science and economics. You can learn the art of persuasion, storytelling, and these sciences have been there for thousands of years. In fact, persuasion, rhetoric, debating, and even in Vedic systems, there was a concept called samvachya, the art of conversation, where the king would be taught by gurus on how he should conduct the entire sabha, how he should argue and let people to have conversations so that best policies for the kingdom would be created. And these scientific concepts are now taught in schools as communication oriented subjects. Little less, according to me. But I think what Rajiv and I are saying is that we, all of us, go through fear of speaking. We have to only practice, be a little bit gritty, be open to feedback, and get going because we have to change the world with our words. This is the time I encourage all my learners out there who are chatting with each other to glory. I mean, I'm looking at their comments and they are just chatting with each other, just and we both are teachers yapping to each other. They are chatting with each other, which is the you know truth of life. But we're going to start our debating in some time. So if you have any questions, not related to our debato, because we'll handle that separately. If you have questions for Rajiv, please ask them now. I'll take one or two of them. Rajiv, has my one last question to you.
Yeah.
What is that one or two messages you want to give to our young teens out there? They're the future of our country. What is that one or two message you would like to give them?
Remain true to your ideals and to your passions, and maintain integrity, honesty, authenticity in everything that you do. Don't try and do some drama because that's what seems to matter. Focus on really being yourself, on investing in yourself continuously, in making an impact and a positive difference to the world around you. And even in debating settings, it's nice to be able to win a debate, but don't cross lines. Don't make personal attacks. Think about your own what it would be like to be at the receiving end, and focus on being a good human being.
Absolutely. Jem, um, I think this is a good time. Please ask questions to Rajiv. Let's see if I can get some questions. Okay, there is a question from Shaurya Chandravanshi. Mr. Rajiv, for NRIs looking to work with Indian government virtually during this pandemic, could you link some sources for applications? Not a very good question for applications, but here's a different question which Shaurya's, I think the inner question is, how does an ordinary citizen work with the government? Are there some opportunities?
Well, there are certain formal ways of working with the government. There are a variety of fellowships and things like that, and a handful of internships. They're probably much harder for someone outside the country. But one of the ways is to reach out to, say, members of parliament and see whether they'd be able to, willing to take you in and take your tap your expertise and your interest. I do have a team that's operating virtually, and and so occasionally I do take in. I take in interns, I take in, what shall we say, full-time people as well. But basically, this team that I'm talking about is a political party's research team. So you need to be attuned to our viewpoint, our ideology, and ready to pick holes in the other side's viewpoint as well. So no, that's one side. I'm also, a professor. I mean, once a professor, always one, and I will still be doing guest lectures. I'll be preparing for various things, including a session like today, and I could always use help for, in different fields. And so maybe you should just reach out to the organizers here, and then we'll figure out how to take this forward. Okay.
So, on that note, I do encourage all of you to look at internship opportunities. I do remember when we were in IIM Bangalore, there was this Lok Sabha internship. There were 5 positions, and 2 of our students joined, and the other 2 from other colleges. There is also Mahatma Gandhi Fellowship Program these days. There are a huge amount of amazing schemes for students. There is a fabulous concept, I think, that is created by a bunch of youngsters on how do we create people for democracy. It's called Indian School of Democracy, run by Prakhar and Himakshi. And there are many more opportunities. I think we all have to engage with the government because government is all of us. I mean, it's our democracy. So we all have to engage. So please do connect with Rajiv and his team and other political parties and see if you can engage and make our country a better place. There's a question from Harsh Shah. How do you suggest us to debate while keeping our ego aside? As sometimes we get egoist upon the reality that we might be more skilled than others. Also, what podcast, books, and sources do you suggest?
Okay. Ego is something that really comes in the way a lot of times. The pride goes before a fall, as they say. If you think you're so experienced and you're so good and you're better than everybody else and you get cocky, then it will affect your preparation. It will set you up for a counterattack where your attempt to humiliate somebody else may actually end up backfiring and it gets you. And if your ego is so big, then you will feel really terrible. So I think the important point is to keep your ego in check and to think about the task at hand. Indian philosophy, which is not to get overtly wedded to both either your ego or to the fruits of your effort. Both of them are worth paying attention to. So I mean, a little humility is always a good thing. The other side, the questions that you're asking today, when it comes to podcasts, etc., there are just so many out there. And I have spent a lot of the lockdown period cycling in my basement listening to podcasts. So I've gained a tremendous amount from, and lost some kilos as well. So it's been, it's been a good experience. So, I would say go to the internet and look at TED Talks. Look at Oxford parliamentary debates. My senior colleague Shashi Tharoor, for example, took part in an Oxford Union debate where he had to argue, make the argument that Britain owed India compensation for having exploited us colonially and taken away our resources. And that speech, went viral. Our Prime Minister Modi referred to it and things like that. And Shashi, being a very smart man, discovered that since it was such a what shall we say, such an that the topic resonated with people, he went ahead and wrote a book about it. And added another to his sort of book a year collection. So that's the sort of thing. And so those Oxford Union debates. I mean, there are a lot of good things out there on TED Talks are good because they are on different themes and they're short, and so it's a good point, and maybe one of the things you should do is crowdsource a list of interesting speeches that are worth sharing with youngsters who want to pick up the skill.
Shalini Das asks a question. Sir, some key points by which we can make our arguments impactful.
Okay, so so basically, his what shall we say? Yeah, Shalini, the basic point is to have illustrations that connect with people, right? It could be in the form of anecdotes and stories. It could be meaningful human experiences which are authentic. If you recall today, I even brought back a memory that I don't like to think of. My first failed attempt at public speaking, and but that way you get to see that I'm as human as everyone else, and if I can overcome that initial setback, so can everyone else. So there's that the reason why we put that. I was not hesitant in sharing that very personal story, but so throughout you're looking for ways to communicate and connect, to get your point of view to the other person. So it could be through the form of a joke, it could be through the form of an argument, it could be the form of something that the other person can connect with and relate to. So think about your audience, think about what common grounds you may share, right? So if you talk to me about movies in some other language that I don't watch or something like that, then I won't know what you're talking about, right? If you crack a Rajnikant joke, then I might certainly understand that, but you may be asking what is a Rajnikant joke? We don't know, right? So that's the sort of thing. So you need to make sure that you're both on that you share a common terms of reference, right? Yeah. When that's the case, then you will be in a position to basically pepper your stories, your speeches with anecdotes, data. Data can be very persuasive. And I've found that a lot of people fudge. Because who's there to question whether it's 46% or 86% when someone's just throwing some number at you? You don't know whether it's true or not, but it certainly comes across as very, very persuasive, right? And then there are all these forms of rhetoric, right? There's material out there. There are figures of speech. There are styles of argument. There are metaphors. There are similes. There are what do you call the straw man argument? There are so many different ways in which people can actually have a healthy argument and convey a point of view. And it all depends on what you're trying to do: defend, attack, persuade. It depends on the situation. Recently, IIM Bangalore launched a program called Samvada, okay, which is a debating platform between fairly significant intellectuals or public intellectuals. And I think the first event in that series was a debate between my colleague Swapan Dasgupta, who is who was nominated by the BJP to the Rajya Sabha, the veteran journalist, and me, representing the Congress and opposition's point of view. on the issue of the Citizenship Amendment Act. Okay, and the whole idea was that we would have a healthy discussion and debate without turning this into the kind of madhouse that you see on television. And we actually did have a fairly persuasive discussion and debate. On the other hand, most recently, Harvard, their students organized a debate between Jay Panda, who is the national vice president of the BJP and a former MP like me, and myself on the issue of something called electoral bonds. And the whole idea was that we would be very, we would stick to certain rules and and not try and do unnecessary drama. And I did find, I shouldn't say this, but that he was using arguments, examples that were a little below the belt, right? That were not necessarily the most appropriate, okay? That were designed to, provoke certain associations, right? So he would say previously contributions would come in from Dawood Ibrahim, okay? Now, you could say coming from criminal elements, from terror sources, who knows, right? But so and both of us are there saying, is this helping us clean up the system or not? But it's like using Hitler to counter everybody else, right? So there are certain lines you want to be careful about crossing, because once you start saying, oh, you're acting as if some terrorist and I are on the same side, or something like that, which is the absolute, not absolute false, absolutely
Yeah.
false, right? So to be very careful about the rules of the game and how you're trying to
Yeah.
make a point. But anyway, leave that. Many times, if there is a voting associated with the debate, right, then people are prone to doing things that are aimed at getting support rather than respecting the rules of the game.
Yeah, yeah. Which is what we are going to witness today. So all the participants who are going to join our debate, we take this very seriously. We are looking at your argument. We're not looking at how badly you're going to use below the belt tactics, because we have to be also respectful to each other's time. That's why we're doing this competition, that we don't want to end up in situations where something you say can hurt someone and it can result in other issues. So we will keep that in mind in our debating. We'll take one last question, and Rajiv has given us so much time. We also have to begin our debates now. This is a question from Dr. Labh Singh. And though there were some very interesting questions, and Rajiv, you and I should know, because there was this one cute little teenager from somewhere who wrote a question, melody itni chocolatey kaise bani? So I'm sure you and I both don't know the answer to that, but we will pass that question. But that guy, I mean, I admire his guts to write this question in a public forum. Dr. Labh Singh's question is very nice. Is language a barrier in debates? And I will amplify it. Many of us Indians, because we come from vernacular mediums, and the corporate world and the world is extremely English oriented, we do have low confidence. I don't know much good English. So, do you think language is a barrier in debates and future life, especially English?
No, it goes in every way. I mean, as I told you, I have challenges in speaking in Hindi, and a lot of speeches are in Hindi. When I do press conferences for my political party, they always send somebody else to share the stage with me to say what I have said in English in Hindi. I wish I could handle both, right? Language is vital for communication and persuasion, and but let me say this, that any mature audience will not pay attention to accent, will not pay attention to grammatical errors, but will pay attention to the content, the persuasive power, and and to the authenticity of the speaker. If the speaker is someone who is genuinely communicating a particular issue or expressing a particular point of view, then people are not going to pay too much attention to these factors. That said, I have found that while I don't laugh at people's broken English or faulty grammar, that when I make mistakes in Hindi, people will say, no, no, it's okay, switch to English. Hey, come on, give me a chance. What's wrong with you? Yeah. So that's the sort of thing. Anyway, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, there are a million more questions, but we will store them and we'll try and put it in our
Share them
blog.
with me. Yeah, share
I will.
them. It will be good to see what people are thinking about.
Some of the questions are really good because the whole idea of doing these sessions is that I really want to understand what these youngsters are talking. And some of the questions are very good. So I'll share them with you, Rajiv. So, first of all, Rajiv, thank you so much for giving us time and enlightening us with how to debate properly. We will keep you posted of how this event shapes up. We'll be delighted if you could join us tomorrow in our award ceremony, but I understand you're busy and we'll let you know about the entire scope. And all my teenagers and parents and listeners out there, thank you for your support. Debato 2020 has received overwhelming support. So we're going to now start. It's going to be a long day for us. All of you participants, please make sure you go back to the Zoom call right now and get ready because we're going to start the first motion. All the judges, please report to the breakout rooms. And by the end of the day, we're going to finish three motions and announce the shortlisted quarterfinal candidates for tomorrow. And hopefully by tomorrow, 6 o'clock, the winners or 6:30, the winners will be announced. Rajiv, once again, thank you very much for your time.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Rakesh. More power to you and to all the youngsters taking part. And let me just end on Teachers' Day that whatever we share, whatever you are doing, this is because we're both teachers and our dharma is to ensure that we enrich and empower everyone that we come across. This is what we are here for. So all the very best and good luck to all the participants. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye. Bye, Rajiv. See ya.